I was curious to see what this band would do with their third album. Their first established their sound as this icy, highly textural soundscape. Their second was like removing a layer of cling film from the first. Everything was brought more into focus, the vocals were front and center, and there was a much tighter pop structure. It was the same duo, but more accessible, and perhaps more commercial. But after half a decade since their last album, and them in the meantime finding success writing and producing for artists like Katy Perry, how would their third sound? Today, we're spinning Womb by Purity Ring. Purity Ring have a tendency to want to take advantage of the whole soundstage, filling up every nook and cranny with these percussive pops and clicks and delicate bell-like synths. In Womb, they are much more sparing with that instrumentation, and it has the effect of putting Megan's lyrics front and centre. And that's not to say that it isn't a full sound, but instead they get the most out of each instrument they use, almost feeling like it could be performed by a whole lot of little electronic band members rather than two producers piecing sounds together. The lyrics just feel honest, like they're not trying so hard, they just sort of are. Maybe it's the success they've enjoyed, or maybe it's the lack of deadline that they set for the album, but everything comes across as much more effortless and upfront. The first track, Ruby Insides, sounds the most like their first album, with these deep synths whooshing in and then cutting short over and over, and the vocals reverse echoing like you're already experiencing them before they actually hit. It's a little out of step with the rest of the album, but because of that connection to shrines here, it sits well as a prologue. If anything, I would have listed this song as track 0, because it doesn't feel like we've really started Womb until we get to the next song, Pink Lightning. So Pink Lightning starts with the first verse. But it's not the first verse. They've taken the recording from the actual first verse and slowed it right down.
Everything is spinning beneath you.
And I get that they're drawing attention to the words, showing a different side of them before the track gets underway, with these fluttering moments of later melodies peeking in here and there. And I get it, the song is better off for it. But what I don't understand is why the lowered pitch. You know, if this was the 70s and they were slowing down magnetic tape and being super innovative, then that would make sense. But this is 2020 and these guys are really talented. I feel like they could have done something a bit better here. So that said, the rest of the track is fantastic. Megan sings about the night before a difficult family reunion. A bunch of them had got together prior, and then suddenly a crazy intense storm hits, including a tree falling through into one of their cabins, nearly killing her niece.
Lying in the dark with a weight curl over my head and all my blood, I'd rather be found out. My recklessness under all the fury of peace. I rest between.
They waited it out, and the next day the reunion happened. And turns out, like a lot of family reunions, it was just as intense as the storm. Megan ties these two events together so intricately that you never really are sure which one she's singing about.
It still feels like a storm now, dying, and all that was undone was done when we were young.
In track 3, Peaceful, Megan tells the story of someone who shared something very kind and vulnerable with her, and she made the mistake of being so absent-minded that she didn't actually hear or remember what this person had shared. The song begins as the realization of this moment hits. There's chiming bells and a string plucking over and over that feels like a clock speeding up. I can feel that shock and guilt just starting to go round and round in her head. After this realization, the beat kicks in, and the feeling of the song changes from one of in-the-moment panic to a more reflective state. The music is made up of a mostly unchanging beat, the continued chiming and plucking, and a synth that moves in and out, providing the majority of the non-percussive music. Again, this keeps the focus on Megan's lyrics, which in the verses are the star of the show. Which is why when I first heard the chorus, I was just a little bit disappointed. Maybe even that's too strong a word. The same line is repeated over and over, and it feels just a little bit like Purity Ring's reaching into Another Eternity, their previous album, and pulling out one of their pop hook tricks.
Go into the light, into
I've been trying to get into it, and I think I might be coming around, but it just doesn't feel as well executed as it had been on their previous release. It feels a little bit safe, whereas they could have just really knocked this one out of the park. I Like the Devil starts with bass. It's very percussive and much less textural than the previous songs, and it's just fantastic. Listen to it through some decent speakers, and this sounds tight and authoritative. And on vinyl in particular, there's this rough, rounded dirtiness that you don't really get on the digital version. I love those moments where the format complements the music so well.
Mother laid her elbows on the bed.
It sounds like it's about how oppressive and thankless traditional gender roles are for women in the family, and breaking free from that kind of expectation. The bass just keeps slogging away, and it really helps draw that image of her mother tirelessly kneading bread while crying.
Heal her hands by kneading up the bread, cleaning off her fingers as she wept.
And the song has a piano. On a Purity Ring song, an actual piano. It's very grounding, and the use of a traditional instrument seems really appropriate to avoid putting a gloss over this kind of subject matter. Megan wrote the song Femia about her aunt, which was the first adult death that she experienced. She keeps mentioning water and dark liquid and drowning, and there's something about that repetitive synthesizer line that feels underwater. There's no actual ocean sounds in this song, so I can't really pinpoint why I associate this music with water. I thought maybe it's old video games, or one thing that came to mind was that underwater episode of BoJack Horseman. For a band that knows how to make you feel uneasy, Femia is consistent and soothing. It's only when death is specifically mentioned that that underwater synth disappears and leaves an empty space in that register of the song. Instead, a deep bass starts lurking around, and Megan is backed by these creepy step-down vocals.
For any death will heaven bring. Tell me a story. How time will pass, how sorrows lit.
As the album continues, we get a mix of tracks that range from dreamy and melancholic to upbeat and maybe a bit danceable. None of them jump out at me individually, but we're listening to the whole album here, and it's that contrast between the tracks that keeps me going through side B. One thing that is consistent, though, is the quality of Megan's voice. It's just so sweet and melodic, and as much as I don't want to discredit the music, it's that voice that just raises them up above that sea of dated and forgettable dream pop releases we've had over the past decade.
When the night falls and the light dies off each other's bodies, now you see.
Stardew is an absolutely fantastic closer to this album. Most of Purity Ring's music has this real wintry vibe, but here it feels like the frost has been broken. The beginning of the track takes me straight back to the Bjork track Frosty from her album Vespertine, where she plays a wind-up music box. And then, bam, it's a dance track. And at first I was like, ooh, is this a missed opportunity? But it's actually a really solid and uplifting album closer. It's one of those songs where all the parts just work, and I found myself sitting back just smiling as I listened to it. Megan's voice is at its sweetest here, climbing high in the chorus, and it's just great.
Drive me like we daydream to the edge of where you start.
In the context of Purity Ring's other albums, Woom retains their identity, but with clear and satisfying growth, and is discernibly different enough to keep you interested. If you're the kind of person that prefers soundscapes and the texture and detail within them, go for their first album, Shrines. If you prefer the structure of memorable pop bangers, but with the authenticity that is often lacking in the genre, go for their second album, Another Eternity. But if you're up for an honest, interesting, confidently composed album, I'd say give Purity Ring's Womb a try. Now, Purity Ring make for some really good late night listening, and I'm not sure if you can tell, but I've very much adhered to that, so I'm going to keep this brief. At the end of a YouTube video, I'm supposed to give you a call to action. You know how YouTube works. Push the subscribe and the typing of the stuff, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for joining.